So, when people talk about the aftermath of investment banking, people talk about the exit opportunities, or people will talk about the impacts on their physical health and stuff like that. But I want to talk about the psychological and neurological impacts of investment banking in my own experience. A review of the positive and negatives, per se. So the first thing is high standards slash excellence. So any bank you go to will demand perfection from anything that you produce. Investment banking talks about how they look for people with attention to detail, and that is no joke. Absolutely. Everything that you do, whether that is a slide or whether that is an Excel, whether that is literally the Excel that goes into a chart that nobody will see, it needs to be perfect to the bank standards, and they will hold you to that high regard. So a common thing in investment banking, M&A, or whatever you want to call it, that you will end up double and triple checking your work, because the last thing the last thing you want to do is to forget to put a comma in or a period somewhere and have your manager take your head off over it. So over time you become very cognizant of possible mistakes, and that has lasting impacts on your psyche. That's right. So even now that I've left banking, I am someone who will double and triple check an email or simple documents or even a message that I'm sending to someone because of that, right? So you become someone who, just has such high attention to detail, and obviously that's a good thing in the work context. But you can assess whether it's positive or negative in a personal aspect, because it's not necessary to be perfect at everything, right? Or is it? It's probably a waste of time to try and go back to refine your email or just to read back the same words for the fourth time. It's not necessary, but that is a side effect of banking that will stick with you, right? So the second thing is that investment banking changed my concept and understanding of money. So if you work at any sort of bulge bracket, whether that is Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, or JP Morgan, whatever, just for any bank, probably you're dealing with financials that are in such high magnitudes that this can get to your head a little bit. So just practically, right? Let's say you're looking, you take, right, an input or something, like you input a number like 1.6 million or whatever in your Excel sheet. You might just put 1.6 for ease, so you don't have like a lot of zeros or whatever, and over time that number will just look like 1.6 in terms of units, even though that is millions. So as you continue your analysis, you might end up with the answer being 1500, right? But that is not 1500 in the same way that it would be. It would actually be 1.5 billion. That is 1,500 billion. Right. So I'd find that over time, like my concept of money would just blow up, right? Or just my concept of numbers got very warped. Like between me and my friend, we could talk about like 1.2k. Like, thousands is a number that you can conceptualize in your day to day life, but billions and trillions are not actually numbers, at least for me, that I would, typically deal with. I don't know what that means. Like, what exactly are we even talking about here? So, you're doing this for like 14, 15, 16 hours a day, and you're exposed to these sort of numbers. Like, I feel like I need to practice more, but I do think that it has an impact on people. Like, on my understanding of what money is, especially, and what numbers actually mean. Another thing that banking did for me was to make me very output oriented. So I feel like in my time in banking, just I cared so much about the job and getting the job done. And what I realized is that nobody wanted to hear, oh, whether you don't have enough information, or whether the task is actually not possible, like the task or the objective, or whether it's going to take a really long time. People just cared about getting the answer to their desk, and I think that has sort of snuck into my personal life. Like, I'm I've become very output driven. Like, okay, how do I make sure that something is done? Like, it's just it's this thing where I'm making progress towards this goal. Like, I want something to be done, and I think that can be a huge positive. At the same time, it might also be a negative. in the sense that I think that I've become to expect that from people as well. So let's say, I'm in a group, I'm planning a trip or whatever, and if someone is supposed to sort out the hotels, like I'm not interested in hearing, oh, there's a problem with this or that, or like the hotel's too far, or there's a pool over there or wherever. Like I just want to see in the chat like hotel book, that type of situation. So I think there are pros and cons to it. So I think one of the most negative sort of psychological impacts of investment banking here is that it made me a lot more impatient. So, in my experience working in banking, no one really had the time to hear your sort of thinking through or spelling something out. Everyone wanted everything as quickly and as abruptly as possible, right? I think that's just because, you're so busy and it's a high stress environment. But what that meant was that I would tailor my words before speaking with senior staff. So to make sure that like I know if I had the question or something that I needed to explain, like I would literally make sure that it takes 30 seconds or less. I think maybe that's a good thing. Maybe being able to present your points succinctly is a good skill, I'm sure. But I do think when it spills over in your personal life, that it's not that great in the sense that personally, I myself, I sort of wanted people to get to the point quicker and say things faster. I think that's a really terrible trait in some cases, and it's something that I'm going to learn to mature. I'm going to learn to mature that side of me. I think, but it did affect me for a while. So the fifth one is, I think, it's a broad one too. Is worth mentioning is coping mechanisms as a whole. I do think that obviously a common one is substance usage or abuse, which some say is a stereotype of investment banking. But I think there are other things such as you notice that people start like twitching or fidgeting a lot because the job is very anxiety inducing, but it also demands of you to have a confident demeanor, so people end up sort of suppressing that anxiety, and that can manifest in a lot of fidgeting and a lot of twitching, using stress balls or whatever, or people just compulsively pacing up and down the office, like literally all day. Yeah. And I think whether that is a psychological impact being manifested in that, or whether that will continue to have an impact on that person, I'm not sure, but I do think it's worth mentioning. For me personally, I think my coping mechanism was just talking to people, just random small talk with coworkers. It just seemed to help. Like, I think investment banking taught me how to talk, especially on my feet. Now, I don't know if that's a manifestation or if that's like a release of anxiety. I don't know, but that's my experience. So, other coping mechanisms which I saw, which might look like, it might come out in other people in the terms of, maybe people overcompensating or whatever, like for stuff they don't get to do in their regular life, like excessive partying. I think that's quite a common one. So people will, go on long benders, let's say, whatever they get to do, this or that, they might get to do, and then they might go overboard with those things. Um, they may even go on massive splurges at the clubs, at the parties, or whatever. And I think that is probably a manifestation of something happening mentally. I don't know. But that's just my experience. I learned not to judge. Like, it's common when people use stuff too, so I don't judge. All right, I'm out here talking to girls in the middle of the night that I have zero interest in, so I'm not going to judge anyone else. All right, so number six, my final point here is sleep deprivation. Gosh, it is such a big topic, and I think it's something that actually quite like I'm not sure that I fully know the impact of that on me, whether that is mentally or physically. But I think fundamentally the body does keep score, and yeah, however your body or your mind chooses to react to conditions that you put it under for however long you're in banking, I think that's something that you just have to deal with. It's a lot. As always, I'm still not I'm still, net positive on investing, especially in investment banking, banking as a whole, the industry, everything, whatever. I do think it's worth highlighting some sort of psychological impact that can affect people that not enough people really talk about. They are lasting and they can be positive or negative depending on how you see it, and they can also permeate over into your personal life. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you have any sort of questions or ideas or anything that you wanted me to cover, and I'll be more than happy to do so. And I'll see you in the next one.